at the end, so I don't want to delay you. I just want to take a few minutes to kind of give the wrap up of this day. And I'd like to begin with a bit of a provocative statement, especially after all that's been said by Tal here today. At the end of the day, there's going to have to be a diplomatic arrangement in Lebanon. Whether we like it or not, we're going to have to reach diplomatic arrangement in Lebanon. It will be coordinated with Hezbollah, whether we like it or not. That's what's going to happen. And the question is now, what will it look like? And in order to answer this question, we must review this resolution, this previous arrangement 1701. And when they called the lobby 1701, why did you call it lobby 1701? I asked. It's a failed resolution, but that's what they decided to do. It's not a good resolution. There is no enforcement. There is no mandate to enforce. No one has the mandate to enforce it. There's a nice sort of a drafting and wording that doesn't talk about pushback, it doesn't talk about withdrawal, it talks about a zone that is free of any illegitimate and weapons. And this is a good principle that we do need to adhere to. But at the end of the day, 17 years later, UNIFIL is supposed to help the Lebanese army to create this area, and UNIFIL has to do everything it can in order to make sure that this area will not serve for any hostile activities such as what we are hearing in the background. But it's not happening. UNIFIL are saying, I don't have the mandate, and these are just a few examples of what happens to UNIFIL. You see the vehicles going down. I'm sorry, it's very difficult to interpret. I'm hearing the music over Sarit speaking. Hezbollah is just basically branding UNIFIL as a double agent. So from the military aspect, we really need to detrimentally harm Hezbollah's capabilities because we cannot deter terrorist organizations. That's what we've learned today. But at least we need to harm their capabilities so that they cannot do what they want to do. I'm taking this from what Lilach said. And we also need a defense plan in place, a passive and active defense plan. The second thing that we need to do when we talk about arrangements is not to rely upon or be based on Resolution 1701. It's failed. It needs to maybe base itself on, maybe we should call the group Lobby 1559, because 1559 is a resolution from 2004. It has nothing to do with Israel. It talks about Lebanon, and it says that we need to disarm all and demilitarize all the groups in Lebanon. And that's what we need to talk about, demilitarization, and not talk about withdrawals and so on. This week, someone asked me, why does Israel refuse to have the Lebanese army, this enforcing force, this authority that enforces 1701? Why are we refusing? And I'm going to ask, who's going to supervise the supervisor? Who's going to oversee the Lebanese army? Over the past 17 years, where was the Lebanese army? Well, it actively aided Hezbollah. It helped Hezbollah conceal its military activity. I was on the border one day and I saw a Lebanese army soldier securing the Hezbollah activist who was taking photos of me, and they were having the time of their lives and they were laughing together. The Lebanese army provided its facilities for Hezbollah's use. The Lebanese army never confronted Hezbollah. They're brothers. They're from the same family. One went to the Lebanese army. One brother went to Hezbollah. And almost 50% of the fighting force in Hezbollah is Shiite. And what can we do? We cannot identify. And we have been canvassing. We have been looking at the zeitgeist in Hezbollah and in Lebanon, but we have not seen any other Shiite movement that will speak from within Lebanon, not the diaspora, against Hezbollah. We cannot find that. Even Amal, which is a rival in terms of politics, actually goes with it in elections and also participates in the struggle against Israel with Hezbollah. And it is not my nightmare as a resident of northern Israel that the ceasefire, it is my nightmare as the resident of the North to have a ceasefire. I don't want it to bring us back to October 6th, because we cannot live with these rockets being launched here and there, just like the people in the south of Israel are living with rockets being launched every other day, and then it ended in a massacre. So any such future arrangement, which will happen whether we like it or not, as I've said, must rely on basic principles that we, Israel, must insist on. First of all, a deadline. How much longer are we going to wait until Hezbollah is disarmed? A year? 2? 17 years? How much longer are we going to wait? How much more launches that come and go are we willing to live with? The second thing we must insist on is an effective force, an effective authority that will be able to enforce the arrangement. Every international forum I speak to, I say, fine, if you want an international force to come in, no problem. You want to die instead of the IDF soldiers? I'm very happy with that. And they look at me and they're shocked. They don't even understand that the meaning of an enforcing authority is a conflict or confrontation with Hezbollah, because they think that if Hezbollah is saying yes and they're signing the agreement, everything will be okay. Again, I want to reiterate and I want to repeat, disarming or demilitarization is not a withdrawal. These are two different things. We keep hearing the word withdrawal. I can't hear it anymore. Hezbollah operatives live and die in southern Lebanon, south of Litani River, and more than 50% of the Hezbollah operatives who were killed over the last war were buried southern of the Litani River, so we can't expect them to withdraw. Another argument I hear that Israel has also breached Resolution 1701. What does that mean? That we fly in the Lebanese air zone? Of course. And why? Because we have to keep flying there, because they keep fighting us, because they keep launching missiles. And I know what the Israelis are thinking. Oh, come on, it's not going to happen. Right. Hezbollah will never demilitarize. They'll never agree to do that. But it doesn't mean that we don't have to demand it. It's two different things. Even if we think that Hezbollah will never agree, we still have to decide what our goals are and insist on them. How do we want our reality to look? What's the end goal, as the Americans like to say? And what am I saying here? I'm talking about solving this conundrum. I'm saying Hezbollah is not going to agree, but this is what Israel should insist on. So what do we do? And this kind of corresponds with what Cliff talked about, excuse me. We cannot understand, we cannot bring any achievement without the international community. If after 7 months of dragging our heels on both fronts, we didn't understand that, and if now a shipment of arms from the United States is being delayed because of what's happening, what do we need in order to understand that we need to give the international community all the information so that they will be with us and that we will work together? And of course I'm talking about decision makers first and foremost. I'm not talking about students in universities. We see that our enemies share an interest which is very clear beyond the overarching purpose. It is their purpose in the current campaign to create a dragging ongoing negotiation, to release the hostages. That's not happening. An ongoing negotiation on nuclear, an ongoing negotiation on... And I remember the day that the IDF discovered the nuclear program in Iran. It's been 20 years of negotiations talking about them no longer having nuclear capabilities, and it's still going on. They still are advancing. In Nasrallah's interest is to leave us hanging, leave the North hanging. And how does he do that? To have 60,000 people out of their homes. And it's enough. What Nasrallah has done is enough. Worse than that, the Americans see a clock ticking in front of their faces, which is the elections. It's an American interest, and we don't share the same interests always. The American interest is to have elections quietly at the end of the year. What can we do? But we also have a clock that's ticking. September 1st, we talked about it. The next academic year, yes, it has a very impact in many circles. But what is the Iranian clock? Is it ticking? Do they have a deadline? Is it eternal? Or maybe someday they'll do so. I really have no idea. I don't think we'll ever know. This week, Yossi Yehoshua, who published that since the beginning of the war, 170 aircraft were sent to Israel, and 370 aircraft and 65 ships with military aid to Israel. And I don't think we can really live without this American help. But it seems to me when I hear this data that we cannot make do without it. And that's why I wake up in the morning. That's why I do what I do at Alma Center. And you saw this entire beautiful project today. That's why I do it. And I think that again, it connects to what Cliff said. I think that Israel should have the legitimacy to protect itself, to defend itself. And this legitimacy is not something that's obvious, unfortunately. We need to work at it. Right now. Not just when the war breaks out, but right now. We need to work at it. The international community must know everything about everything we talked about today, and Cliff talked about that. It needs to understand that Iran is a global threat. It's not just a threat posed to Israel. One of the questions I was asked before the war that really annoyed me was, do you think Israel will attack Iran and Iran's nuclear facilities soon? And I said, why do you expect Israel to attack Iran's nuclear facilities? Is it only in Israeli interest to attack Iran's nuclear facilities? Does anyone else care? Europe? The United States? Only Israel cares? And that is something that needs to be changed. This worldview. The international system must understand the deep crisis that we're experiencing here as residents of northern Israel, but it also needs to understand the depth of the global threat posed by the Ayatollah regime in Iran. It's posed to us, to Israel, to Europeans, to the United States, even to Australia. We gave information during the war about ceremonies held in Australia in memory of Hezbollah operatives killed in southern Lebanon. And if I were to go forward a minute with my statements, if I go out of the international aspect and try to sum up everything that's been said today, I began this day by saying that we want to focus on the problem rather than the solution, but I can't help myself. And I do want to use this stage to put some ideas on the table. Perhaps they're not ripe, perhaps they're not well-formed or thoroughly baked, but let's start working on how to have the northern Israeli residents how to get their security back. And unfortunately, in panels, in TV studios, it sounds like these ideas are conflicted. But I think we should put them one next to the other, not against the other, not pitch them against each other. First of all, we need a military achievement. We need to compromise Hezbollah's capacities. Gallant is saying such an achievement has been made, has been accomplished. Prove it. How many missiles? What's been harmed? Where? They're saying that Hezbollah is no longer on the fence, but still anti-tank missiles are being shot, so please explain that to me. And if there is no such accomplishment, we need to have such an accomplishment. And I'm not talking about whether it's an overall comprehensive full-scale war. I think a lot more can be done even below the full scale. There was a time during this war when we did that. This is important in negotiation, in diplomatic negotiations, because even if ultimately we do reach an arrangement and there's no other choice, if Hezbollah will be hurt more, we'll get more out of it, out of this arrangement. Because if Hezbollah comes to this arrangement strong, then it'll take longer. Protection. It does not conflict with the first idea. We need protection. It's inconceivable that we don't have protection. It's inconceivable that we send kids to schools that are not protected, where the school principal says you can decide if you should send your kid or not. It's inconceivable. It's unimaginable. We don't even know the numbers. We don't know how many of northern Israeli residents don't have protection, don't have safe rooms. But there are so many because so many buildings were built before 1990. And for me, the northern Israel is Golan Heights and the Galilee. It's inconceivable that we're not protected, and it still doesn't contradict the fact that we need to have a military accomplishment. We need to have community defense plans, just as Lilach and Gidi talked about. And again, it doesn't contradict protection, it doesn't contradict the military achievement. And we need to tell the inhabitants if there are such plans, and we need the IDF to address the main threat scenarios. Go straight to the buses as soon as I'm done, says Sarit. The main threat scenario is something we have to prepare for. If there are walls of Jericho, if there is an attack plan by Hezbollah, the IDF knew all about these plans, but it wasn't prepared. We need to prepare for the main threat scenarios. That must be the basics of our approach, and I would say deterrence and warning out, main threat scenario in. In any case, any plan of war, whether we like it or not, whether we initiate it or not, whether we get dragged into it or not, must include its soft aspects: humanitarian, addressing the population of the enemy and the international campaign. This is the main insight, the main conclusion from Gaza. And our campaign is already talking about public diplomacy, and therefore it needs to preempt the military campaign. No matter what, we mustn't leave the initiative for the next massacre in the hands of Hezbollah. We mustn't allow Hezbollah to decide when and how the campaign it plans for the occupation of the Galilee to look like. We must take away from it the capacity to carry it out, but at the same time to be prepared to defend our cities, even if there's a ground invasion. And most importantly, Metula is the same as Jerusalem. That's what needs to be our guiding principle. And our enemies see it. If we say we give up on Metula, we'll give up on Jerusalem. We saw what happened when we didn't do this in the Gaza envelope. Thank you so much.